Hey, everybody, it's Chris, and I've got a new interview for you with Dr. Dean Sherzai. Dr. Dean and his wife, Dr. Aisha, are co directors of the Alzheimer's Prevention Program at Loma Linda University, and they're authors of the 30-Day Alzheimer's Solution: Prevent and Reverse the Symptoms of Alzheimer's Disease, Dementia, and Cognitive Decline. And this book is based on decades of that they have spent studying the impact of nutrition on their patients. And from what I understand, this is the first and only nutrition program that's proven to prevent and reverse signs of cognitive decline at any age. Now, this is personal for me because my dad died of Parkinson's disease just in the last year, and he was 82. So, he did have a full life, but he died of a neurodegenerative disease. And my wife, on her side of the family, has had her grandmother basically died of Alzheimer's and dementia. And so, it kind of runs in both of our families, so to speak. And I am concerned, right? I would prefer not to lose my cognitive functions as I age. I'm only 44. And so I'm excited to talk to you and share this information. And I think it's really good news and hopeful. And that like so many chronic diseases, our choices can really set us up for a healthy future or for one that's not so healthy. And I think it's empowering. So I'd love to start with your personal health journey, as a trained physician, as a medical doctor, and you studying neurodegenerative disease. I imagine they weren't talking about nutrition very much in med school, right?
Actually, there is no teaching as far as nutrition is concerned. And just now, in certain universities, they're starting to speak in minimal amounts about nutrition. We work in Loma Linda University, which is one of those universities that has more of a focus on lifestyle and prevention. But beyond that, there isn't much. And during the time when I was going to medical school, there was absolutely no mention of nutrition. If there was any mention, it was in relation to diseases like B12 deficiency. I wouldn't call it nutritional talk, but more deficiency talks. Vitamin C deficiency causes scurvy, and vitamin D deficiency, B12 deficiency, but nothing as far as nutrition in general, and nothing about the most important risk factor in your life, or the very most important treatment factor in your life, which you put into your body 3 to 5 times a day, which is food. You talked about Parkinson's. I did my work, my residency and training at Georgetown University, but then I went to National Institutes of Health doing some wonky research in Parkinson's. Putting BDNF and GDNF into the brains of patients who have Parkinson's or PSP, which is a much more aggressive movement disorder, or similar things with Alzheimer's. After years and years of work in NIH and then UCSD, which was the number one neuroscience program in the country, we were kind of disillusioned. Not that we're against molecular research. That would be silly. A lot of lifestyle docs have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. We're not like that. Medicine works, science works, but there isn't appropriate placement of focus on prevention, on the most important prevention, which is nutrition. So after years of working in the clinical realm and the research realm and the molecular realm, we looked around and said, is there another option? And we found Loma Linda, which is one of the only healthiest place in America, Blue Zone in America. And we came here to study. And what we found was just remarkable. What we found is that lifestyle, it affects probably your brain more than any other organ by far. So yeah, that's where we are, and we've been working in prevention for at least 15 years to date.
What was the major wake up call for you? Obviously, it sounds like you'd become disillusioned, and after sort of studying drug development and things, and just seeing like this isn't really working, right? Like,
Yeah.
was there one person? Was there one person's research that you found? Was there a book? Was it how did I mean? Because most doctors, they're trained to do something really well, and they just kind of stay in the lane and
Yeah.
did their whole career. That's what they do. Or if they're researchers, they just go deeper and deeper and deeper down the molecular rabbit hole looking for something, some compound that will lead to a drug that maybe will help. And they never break out of that track. So, I mean, it is so remarkable to me. And I know there's a ton of diet and lifestyle physicians now. It's a growing movement, and it's exciting. But yeah, was there a specific person or book or catalyst that really got your attention?
Yeah, while I was at UCSD, we were working with some amazing people. Dr. Leon Thal, which was basically the top neurologist working in the country, was my mentor. He had 800 publications, but it's the same molecular stuff. And I was working in the lab looking at UCSD has one of the largest brain banks, so thousands of brains that have been donated. And you look at the slices and look at the temporal lobe, look at the pathology of Alzheimer's under the microscope over and over again, and the same clinical trials with the same failures. And so we started looking around. We're kind of out of the box people. We met in Afghanistan, where both of us went back to kind of help with rebuild the country. We've traveled the world and trying to help in other countries, and we've always looked at not just alternatives, but a wider view of things. So after a little bit, we decided that to look wider than what was in front of us. And one of the researchers in UCSD, Elizabeth Barrett Connor, she passed away recently, was an amazing researcher, a public health researcher. She had over 800 publications, imagine that, on lifestyle, but nobody knew much about her, and the bigger national realm. So we looked at her work and how lifestyle affected cardiovascular disease, cancer risk, and everything else. Yet there was very little on neurological diseases. So we started working on one project, specifically stroke and lifestyle. And again, the data was coming back the same way. It was then that we decided there must be another thing to look at, another path to focus on. And that's what brought us to Loma Linda. And then at the same time, we started looking at all these other people like Essie's work and others who had done the work. And that kind of pulled us in that direction.
Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn is who you're referring to, who I've also interviewed. And it's a terrific interview for folks that want to understand the impact that diet has on your cardiovascular health.
Yes.
And these are two sides of the same coin, right?
It is. I mean, cardiovascular, this is the same body. It's almost like as if people think that the brain is a separate system that was brought in by aliens and put into this body. It's the same. As it happens, it's much more needy. It's much more, it's 3 pounds, 2% of your body's weight, but consumes 25% of your body's energy. It's the most vascular organ in the body. So given the vascular nature of it, given the energy requirements, those very things that affect other body parts affects the brain more. And it's also enclosed in this hermetically sealed environment called the blood-brain barrier that doesn't let much in and out. So if you put trash in, that's going to accumulate in that space. And if you don't, it's going to clean up the system well, especially during sleep. Sleep is a big factor as far as cleaning is concerned. So that's why whatever we've learned as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and everything else actually applies to brain, but exponentially more. And then there's one other factor, which is the cognitive reserve, which is how much you challenge your brain throughout life, creates redundant connectivity, which gives you protection. That's a thing that's different from other body parts. So in a way, it can give you even more protection, more resilience, if you just give it the chance.
Okay, so I'd love to talk about two things. The first thing is I'd love for you to explain what is causing neurodegenerative disease, And then we'll get into the solutions, right, that you've
Yes.
discovered. But for just the average person, what is the progression? Like how is the brain becoming less effective and degrading over time? What is
Yeah.
causing this?
Yeah. So most people up to recently thought that it was a genetic disorder that started a cascade that actually led to the degeneration. There are diseases like that. Huntington's disease. It's a lesion. It's an abnormality in gene on chromosome 4, one little locus, and that creates these repeat cycles. CAG, CAG, CAG. And if you have more than 30 something repeats, you're going to get the disease no matter what you do. Yeah, lifestyle might affect it a little bit, but that horse is out of the barn. There's nothing you can do. We are looking into technologies like CRISPR and others to genetically modify those. And there are some diseases like that, but much of the degenerative diseases of aging are not that way. Genes have an effect, but it's a risk factor effect through proxies of lifestyle. I'll explain that in a bit. So for most of the diseases like strokes and different kind of strokes and degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and Lewy body disease and frontotemporal dementia, genes have a percentage different for different ones of influence, but it's the lifestyle factors that matter. So what percentage is driven? Let's take Alzheimer's. What percentage is driven by kind of genes that are going to become disease no matter what, like the Huntington's gene? Most people up to recently would say all of Alzheimer's is driven by that kind of gene, meaning that if you have the genes, you're going to get the disease. That's not the case. Only 3%. Only 3% of Alzheimer's is driven by genes that are not affected profoundly by lifestyle. They are affected by lifestyle, but not profoundly. So that's presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and APP. What about the other 97%? The other 97% are affected by genes like ApoE4. But all of these genes are lifestyle genes. So what is ApoE4? ApoE4 is a gene that codes a protein that transports fats. So ApoE4 does the job poorly and causes inflammation. ApoE2 does the job very well, and protects you. So it has to do more with how the body responds to environment more than the gene itself. And the rest of the genes are the same. When you look at all of this, there are four main processes that lead to degeneration: inflammation, oxidation, glucose dysregulation, sugar dysregulation, and lipid dysregulation, fat dysregulation. And you can come to these diseases from different paths, and often it's a combination thereof. I mean, to be honest, in the United States and most of the West, almost everybody has all of those things after a certain age, just because of the way we eat. That's a clue right there. What would affect inflammation, oxidation, glucose dysregulation, lipid dysregulation? Food, 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 and food. What's lipid dysregulation? The amount of fat and saturated fat and trans fats and hydrogenated fats in your body, to the point that if you your system cannot tolerate it, your system is overwhelmed and creates significant clogging of the arteries. And by the way, as I said earlier, what's the most vascular organ in the body? The brain, by far. I mean, if you ever look at the pictures of the brain denuded of other tissue, and all you see is the blood vessels, you say, where is everything else fitting? Because this looks like a big blob of vessels. So the damage by fat on these vessels is just tremendous. So let's talk about glucose dysregulation.
Wait, before you talk about glucose,
of course,
there's a huge trend right now of people eating excessive amounts of fat.
Yes.
Right? You need fat. Fat's good. Fat's good for your brain. Right? You should be keto. You should be paleo, whatever, right? We need more fat. So
it's
can
just
you weigh in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know who I heard this from, but people love hearing good news about their bad habits, and they'll create science, and they'll create academies around it, and they'll create movements around it. They'll create false science around it, and TV shows around it, and then diet plans, because a lot of people want to hear the thing that they like to, the bacon diet. They don't call it the bacon diet, but much of that fat-oriented diet is about the diet that we're used to.
Bacon,
and by the
butter,
way,
and coconut oil.
yeah, correct, exactly. when I hear a very well-known internet doctor saying that the brain is made of fat, therefore you need fat, it's just bewildering. It's just ridiculous. Yes, the brain has a slightly greater proportion of fat because of myelin, but it's not it's structural fat. It's not storage fat. The brain has no storage fat. And the structural fat it creates from its own, we have plenty of that from regular food. You know, even if you don't have any fat in your diet, you'll do fine. The one fat that you do need is omega-3s, EPA, DHA. And you can get that from diet very easily, very, very easily. There's no question, especially if you limit the omega-6 pathway. If you limit the saturated fat, then that becomes much easier for plant-based sources like chia and flaxseed and others to convert ALA to DHA. So I'm jumping ahead of myself.
I had chia and flax this morning in my oatmeal.
There we go. There we go. Absolutely. More than enough. So it's important to know that the fat argument is wrong. The fat argument creates oxidation, inflammation. The fat argument causes the glucose dysregulation. In fact, all those 4 pathways that I talked about is driven mostly by fat, saturated fat and trans fats and hydrogenated fats.
So what are they doing in the brain? What are these fatty acids doing in the brain?
They're clogging the smaller arteries. They're causing inflammation. They're causing oxidative cascades that destroy the walls. They are the blood-brain barrier has been shown to be significantly poorly affected by those fats, and the process goes on. And let's talk about the diabetes and pre-diabetes that is more affected by the fat than the sugar. Although we're not a big fan of sugar either. I mean, that's part of the things that we tell people to avoid. Simple sugars, not carbs, simple sugars. Yeah. So it's just bewildering. And the data they come up with is from keto studies, which are all 6-month studies. 6-month studies with 20 people, 6-month studies with 5 people, 9 people. What does that even mean? It means nothing. And their signal is usually so small that it falls within the confidence interval. You know, so it's right. So it's meaningless.
Well, I think what you're alluding to, just for my audience, is the fact that you can take a person who's eating a really unhealthy diet, you can put them on a ketogenic diet, which has more fruits and vegetables, maybe not fruit, but has vegetables and has whole foods. And in 6 months' time, a lot of things in their body will improve, right? They'll lose weight. And when they lose weight, their blood markers improve, their inflammation may go down, their blood glucose may go down. Like, so there's a lot of things you can measure in a short time window that are improved, but over a long time horizon, those benefits diminish and then you start to develop problems. That's what you're getting at, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you don't look at it in that broader spectrum view, you're missing the picture. You're missing the picture big time. So fat, the story of fat is false. It's the most damaging product that we have in our body, that we put in our body at multiple levels. And when it comes to Alzheimer's, we know that the main gene that has been associated with a much larger percentage of Alzheimer's cases, which is ApoE4, its main function is lipid transport. And we know what happens when lipid transport is overwhelmed with saturated fat, especially if you have a poor gene like ApoE4, it's going to be the main dominant factor for dementia over time, which starts actually years earlier. And then you see the effects, in your 60s and 70s.
Okay. So what's the sugar connection, the glucose connection?
Same thing. I mean, the body's preferred source of energy is sugar. There's no question. It's not ketones. I mean, the whole ketone study realm came from neurology, specific group of children that had intractable seizures. And after 3 to 4 drugs, which didn't control, they put them in this shock state of ketosis. And it marginally controlled that. Beyond that, we don't have much data, much valid data. You can find all kinds of weird data on PubMed, which is like somebody who ate aluminum and cured their whatever. Those marginal studies mean nothing. We're talking about when a study is robust, when it's repeatable, and it's also shown the test of time, more than 6 months or so. There's nothing on keto that actually fits that model. With sugar, you want sugar to be released slowly and in appropriate amounts. When it's too fast, it actually shocks the system. We know that the insulin receptors are internalized when you give too much sugar consistently to the cell, any cell, but especially brain cells. But when you give glucose in a complex form, which is digested and slowly released, that's actually the optimal form of energy. It goes through the proper pathways of degradation, glycolysis to get you those 36 ATPs and energy. But other alternatives are circumventing the whole process of accepting the energy source through the cell and then pulling it in and making it go through that process. And that might be beneficial short term or not even beneficial. It might actually give you a signal short term because it's almost like giving nitro to a cell. But if you give nitro to a Pinto or a Toyota, well, I had a Honda Civic in the 1980s, to a Honda Civic for a protracted period of time, what are you going to do to that engine? You're going to burn it. It's not an efficient source of energy. So we know that long term it does damage.
So explain what exactly these sugar spikes are doing to insulin receptors.
So the way that the body is, especially the brain, is incredibly selective in how it consumes energy. In fact, it's selective in how it consumes anything. The blood-brain barrier, very little can get through that. In fact, even glucose molecules have to bind to a receptor to come into a cell, into the central nervous system. And that's the proper way. It wants it that way because otherwise those 87 billion neurons, 1 quadrillion connections will be overwhelmed with the kind of energy which will burn out the mitochondria over time, which will cause inflammation over time. The glucose surrounds the cell. Let's say I'm creating a hypothetical. The receptor, which is the insulin receptor, sees the insulin, and the insulin actually rises and falls in relation to the glucose amount, right? So if the appropriate amount of glucose is there, the insulin amount is proper, and then it binds to the receptor binds the glucose, and then the glucose is internalized. And then it goes through several other processes, and then to the mitochondria, where it's broken down into 36 ATP molecules or energy molecules. So that's a long ways, but that's the proper way. That's actually the way the body wanted it to, because over time it wouldn't cause damage. And when it's too much sugar, what it does is it realizes there's too much, insulin goes up, and the receptors see there's too much insulin. They internalize the insulin receptor. So now you have lots of sugar everywhere, but no receptors. So the cell is dying of or starving from, as far as glucose is concerned. I'm simplifying it here, but basically because there's so much glucose, the doors are closed. Everybody inside the cell are starving for sugar, but no sugar is coming in. That's how the system works.
Oh, wow. So that's really interesting. I've never heard it explained that way. And so basically, it's like there's what you're saying. It sounds like there's an overreaction maybe on the cellular level with when you have an excessive amount of sugar. The cell's like, oh, that's too much. We can't let that much in. We got to sort of like, hunker down, and then it doesn't get enough.
The whole body works on a feedback mechanism. Whether it's your endocrine system, whether it's your pituitary hypothalamus, whether it's your limbic hypothalamic pituitary axis, which releases all these hormones, there's always a feedback loop telling it, oh, this is too much, hold back. There's always a feedback loop. In fact, I'm not going to digress into that, but there are lots of diseases where the feedback loop has gone awry. So that's a whole different conversation. But the feedback loop of glucose, the main energy of the body, had to have a feedback loop. It knows when it's too much, so it internalizes so that the cell is not overwhelmed. That's how it works.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think about if you open your window and there's a nice breeze, right? And you're like, it's nice. Let's let some fresh air in. But then if the wind started blowing really hard, you'd be like, shut the window, right? Everything in the room's blowing. All my papers are blowing around.
Actually, it's like there's a little lever by the window, backward lever, so that at a certain rate, the door is opening a little bit. and air is coming in. If it's too much, it pushes the door too far out, and the lever is pushed out, and the door closes permanently, or not permanently. So there's that lever mechanism that gives feedback that beyond this point, I'm simplifying it again, but that's a good visualization of the feedback loops that exist in the body. The feedback loops work. Here is where I actually part ways with a lot of people, which they talk about natural and what's been happening throughout evolution and the lifetime. We're cheating the system a bit as well. Most of what our system is dedicated to is short-term survival, but we're now cheating that, and we're trying to create long-term thriving. So we'll talk about that later.
Okay. So over a person's lifetime, eating the wrong types of food are going to create chronic inflammation, glucose dysregulation, accumulation of fatty acids, and basically clogging up, tiny capillaries and blood vessels and blocking blood flow, it sounds like, to important parts of the body and the brain. And when blood flow is blocked, then those cells are deprived from nutrients and they die, right? That's the basic process?
It is. And they start the dying process. What happens is when the dying process starts, that dying process itself creates toxins, or I wouldn't call them toxins, byproducts that further accelerate that dying process. It's almost like a cascade has been unleashed. So you want to head it off early enough before the cascade has been started. So there are now these doctors that are coming out saying that they can reverse Alzheimer's, fulminant Alzheimer's, or at least playing around that word, that concept. We say that's so irresponsible. Once that cascade has started, you might be able to slow it down a little bit, but you're not going to reverse it. So it's important that we don't make bombastic claims. We were told that if we just make that claim, that we would sell 2 million extra books. That's not worth that's not what we're here for. We want to make sure that we espouse and spread appropriate information. And the appropriate information is start early, before the disease is fully on board, before Alzheimer's has completely started its cascade. Even at the MCI stage, which is pre-Alzheimer's stage, which is mild cognitive impairment stage, one can do significant pushing back to the point that a person might not see the disease in their normal lifespan, right? And that's important. This is a disease that's the fastest growing epidemic in the West, besides Corona, which is, but it's the fastest growing epidemic. It's the number one cause of mortality, morbidity in Japan and in UK and many other Western countries. It's number 3 in the United States and growing fast. And yet we keep putting money into pharmaceutical approaches to it. 100% failure. The one drug that was just approved controversially has minimal effect. It costs $50-something thousand per person, and it has side effects. Now, I'm not against it. I think it should be pursued. It should be studied further, and it's a great breakthrough as far as potentially affecting some aspect of the disease. But it should not be looked upon as the cure, not even close. We have a process that can reduce your risk of Alzheimer's by 60 to 90%. We say 90%, other people say 60%, because we think that others don't pursue the more comprehensive approach. In fact, there hasn't been the most. And if you do pursue the more comprehensive approach, you reduce the risk by 90% of a disease that costs Americans $540 billion. This is in comparison to the second costliest disease, heart disease, at $120 billion. Third costliest disease, all cancers, $70 billion. Alzheimer's alone, more than $500 billion. If you can reduce that by 50%, that will change our healthcare system in general. Yet we don't even talk about lifestyle prevention. And when we do, it's a contrived little program that you throw at people, go take these courses. And what we do is we actually have an online environment where we get people on a daily basis, show them how to cook, how to inculcate this into their lifestyle. And that's the only way we think that you can truly bring about change. We won the National Academy of Medicine Award for our work in the Black churches and other communities, because if we don't create a model that's applicable to given populations, again, we're doing the same thing, just an overtop program that will never connect, will never stick.
I want to talk about the diet, especially. I know it's a plant-based diet. That's what you have found to be the most effective for prevention, which is not surprising to me, as I've been an advocate for plant-based diet for over a decade publicly, and it's what it was a major component in my surviving cancer with a holistic approach. And so, but before we get into that, I would love for you to talk about beta amyloid plaque, the role that has in brain degeneration over time, and how sleep can help with that.
Yeah. So beta amyloid is the thing that has the shiny object that's taken everybody's attention. Beta amyloid is a thing. It is an important factor. It's the downstream factor for majority of the Alzheimer's and dementia types, meaning that the lifestyle factors accumulate damage that leads to beta amyloid accumulation. And beta amyloid accumulation happens even in normal aging. And the reason that it was highlighted so much and billions of dollars was spent in research trying to block it, enzymatically cleave it, obstruct it with antibodies, is because we focus on those 3%, those 3 genes, right? Presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and APP, that those people developed Alzheimer's 100% of the time. And in others, they saw that even in other populations later in disease, you actually saw the amyloid and tau accumulate significantly. We're not saying that those are not parts of the disease, but we're actually saying that they're not the main contributors in a great majority of dementias.
So you're saying this is more of a byproduct than a cause?
There are a great number of the dementia cases. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And only 3% of Alzheimer's, it is the cause. It's the driving factor. In fact, those genes are directly connected to amyloid, be it ApoE4, presenilin 1, and presenilin. For others, it's the byproduct that happens. And in even normal aging, it happens. And in other studies, they've shown that people who had significant amyloid accumulation in their brain, yet they never developed the dementia. There's more complexity to that, so I want to make sure that I'm true to the science and don't overstate things, but that's the general picture.
I had read years ago, and I might have even mentioned this in my first book. I don't remember. I think I did, but this sort of fascinating phenomenon that happens when you sleep, that your cerebrospinal fluid is sort of washing your brain like a dishwasher. There's a sort of a pulsing thing happening, and it's helping clean and detoxify your brain as you sleep. Am I on base on that or off base?
Oh, absolutely. The sleep is such an important function that we understate. We get invited to these places where people do all kinds of cleansing, all kinds of chemical cleansing and this and that. And we say that we never get invited to these places again, because to their chagrin, we say there are only 2 kinds of cleanse that we know: water and sleep. 2 main kinds. And sleep, there's a reason that, we sacrifice safety, 8 hours, 1/3 of our life, where we're absolutely paralyzed. Why would that have been introduced into our existence? How could that have been beneficial in a world of, animals that could prey upon us during those times? Because sleep is that important for the brain. During sleep, 2 main things happen: consolidation of thought and memory. And that's where part of why dreaming is important. And then the second thing, and even more important thing, is cleansing. You have this lymphatic system, which is actually, we didn't even know that there was a lymphatic system in the brain up to recently. And now we've discovered there's a lymphatic system, which is a combination of this pulsing of the cerebrospinal fluid as well as glial cells that come and clean the environment. If you have a good night's sleep, which is 7 to 8 hours, yes, that's the optimal. There is no question. Less than that is not optimal. More than that is not optimal. So people who sleep 9 hours, there's something wrong there where you need 9 hours. You're trying to catch up. So 7 to 8 hours of deep restorative sleep. We have this concept called neuro, N-E-U-R-O, nutrition, exercise, unwind, which is stress management. R is restorative sleep, where you go through these 4 phases of sleep: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and REM sleep, at least 4 to 5 times a night. You do that, there's consolidation of memory. People have significant better memory than those who don't go through those stages. And then cleansing of the brain, where all these byproducts of this incredibly hardworking organ is taken out at night, be it the amyloid, which is a normal byproduct of life and aging, be it other byproducts such as toxins and others, are cleansed. And even the connections, the axonal connections that are not functioning, are severed and eaten up. But when people don't get good night's sleep, this actually becomes pathologic. These glial cells start eating away from good brain. In fact, people have seen that people who don't have good sleep have smaller brains because of this lymphatic system going awry. So sleep is profoundly important. If you're going to invest in anything, sleep in your sleep, invest in your sleep hygiene, in your sleep space, in cognitive behavioral therapy if you have running thoughts and other things, because it does better cleansing than any program out there.
There's a really fascinating book I read, I guess, a couple of years ago called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. And one of the takeaways that stuck with me from that book, I'd like to read it again, frankly, because there was so much interesting stuff in there, but was he was talking about the fact that in the early hours of the evening when you're asleep, your body is really restoring your physical body. And then in the later hours of the night is when your brain gets the benefit. And so people who stay up too late, they're short circuiting or short changing, I should say, the restorative benefits of sleep on their body. And if you get up too early, you're shortchanging the benefits on your brain.
Yeah.
And we have a culture of people that are staying up too late and then getting up too early. And he even talked about in his book that if you are not dreaming, that dreaming is a very important process of brain regeneration and memory. And if you're not dreaming, then you are not sleeping enough.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, dreaming there's a reason you dream. There's a reason you're paralyzed. So you don't act out the dreams. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So we've talked about sleep and this beta amyloid plaque issue. And thank you for clarifying that. So I'd love to drill into your neuro protocol, exactly what you have found is helping people prevent. And how do you measure prevention? Are there risk factors that go down, inflammation markers? How do you know that what you're doing is helping people prevent these neurodegenerative diseases?
So you can do much more intensive and invasive processes, such as look at MRIs and PET scans and comprehensive, but you can do comprehensive cognitive testing, really comprehensive cognitive testing that actually, which is what we do, looks at minute changes in cognition. And these are not the kind of tests that would fall prey to day-to-day vacillations. So we can actually delineate, the totality of their cognition. So those kind of tests that we can do, we do it once every year, so you actually can follow change. In general, if you don't make lifestyle changes, there's always the decline, starting in your 20s, believe it or not. But then if you do make changes, you actually see an increase, improvement, because we have that much capacity. So there's a lot we can do, both imaging wise, blood biomarkers, and neurocognitive wise as well.
So what does a person need to know? What do they need to do? What changes do they need to make in their life if they care about protecting their brain and preventing Alzheimer's or dementia or Parkinson's? What do I need to do? So
it's going to surprise you. I start with mindset. Get rid of 2 words: motivation and moderation.
Okay.
Motivation is a useless word. It's not measurable. It doesn't have metrics. It doesn't have denominator. It doesn't have a thing that you can put your hand around. Just raw 15th century language that's coming to us. We got to get rid of some of those language, or we have to get complexity to it to give it metrics so we can action and we can act upon it. The second word is moderation, which is a lazy word that people use to try to get out of doing things. As soon as you say eat plant-based, everything is about moderation. They don't even know what that means. So if you have a bucket of cyanide, what is moderation? Half a bucket? If you eat meat 7 times a day, what's moderation? 4 times a day? It's no different. So throw away
Well,
moderation.
I like to make this joke about moderation.
Yes.
Occasionally, I will post something online, right, and someone may comment, "Well, everything in moderation," right?
Yes.
And my favorite response is, "That's why I only smoke crack once a week."
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So moderation means nothing. It's context, direction, quantity of direction, smart goals, specific, measurable. Your dopamine reward system is based on metrics, on identifiable successes. Literally, all of Tony Robbins and everybody's talk could be distilled down to how dopamine functions. Dopamine's action is expectation and direction and movement, but measurable movement that you can actually feel, be it visually or otherwise. We leave that. So we start with getting rid of those two. Instead of it, we replace it with identify good signs. That's harder today than before, because now there's so much noise in social media. But think to yourself, where do most large studies, most scientists come down to? I mean, whether it's the mind study, whether it's when we've done work in all of these, a Mediterranean study, a Mediterranean diet studies. We did the largest study in California, teacher study, 133,000 women over 20 years looking at Mediterranean diet. The MIND study, the Framingham study, the Adventist Health study where we worked at, all of them. These are, they call it epidemiological studies, but even when you do prospective studies, all the studies, what's the common denominator? The common denominator is not fish. The common denominator is not wine. The common denominator is plants, 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 plants. Greens, beans, legumes, cruciferous vegetables, that kind of stuff. And the common denominator of negative part of it is, in fact, this is how you measure Mediterranean diet. This is surprising because when you look at how in academic settings they measure Mediterranean diet, it's actually a plant-based diet, but they just call it Mediterranean because it's a sexy term. It's an interesting term. It's a nuanced term.
Sure.
Like as if, what is that? So Mediterranean diet, you give a high grade for plants, greens, beans, vegetables, and a source of omega-3, be it fish or otherwise, but not chicken or anything else. And you give a low grade for meats, cheeses, dairies, butter, things of that nature, and fats. So what is that diet? That's a whole food plant-based diet or plant predominant diet. So if we look
when you say the common threads, are you saying this is what's common among real people who have exceptional mental health, brain health in their elderly years? Is this what we're looking at, or?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, like I said, these diets have shown effect on cognition and stroke and everything else. But of course, also in cancer and diabetes and heart disease. But definitely in cognitive diseases, this is the common denominator. Plants, 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 plants. And avoidance of saturated fat, sugar, simple sugars, not carbs. There's no reason to demonize carbs and fiber. Those are essential. And so sugar, simple sugar, fat, saturated fat, and salt in smaller amounts. You need some salt because it's a source of iodine. It's a source, but minimal, much less than what we get in the Western world. So if you reduce those and instead of replace them with something, and that's an important concept, and add greens first, beans, legumes, cruciferous vegetables, tea for your drink and water for your drink, and herbs and spices instead of salt, you've just changed your lifestyle. But you do it in small increments, measurable increments, which is understand what you're doing as far as nutrition is concerned. What's your consumption of sugar? What's your consumption of fat? Where is it coming? What's your consumption of greens, beans, and all of those? And then add those positive things in measurable ways that you can check off. Today, I'm going to start having 2 servings of greens every day. I'm going to focus on that only. And every time I do it, at the end of the day, I check a box. That checking of the box is literally dopamine release and addicting. You're making yourself addicted to good behavior. And then every time that you don't eat saturated fat that day, check that box. Makes you addicted to positive behavior. So that's how behavior should change, measurably or specifically, measurably, attainably, and in a time-bound way. And that's how we can change our underlying behavior, which is habits, non-thinking behavior, which is habits, which is not driver of 99% of our behaviors.
That it makes a lot of sense, especially creating that reward system for yourself where you are, again, yeah, just the simple thing of crossing an item off a to-do list or checking a box, right? It definitely
Yes.
makes you feel good. And I'd love to talk about the feel good chemicals in your brain, right? Like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, how these chemicals, like how the choices that you make in life and the food that you eat and the things that you do, how they increase those levels and can increase your overall happiness too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So much of the control you have is over goal setting. And so goal setting affects behavior. Goal setting affects behavior, of course, but goal setting affects in backward fashion the dopamine release. You take control of your dopamine, which then indirectly affects your serotonin, which is your emotional, depression, anxiety, all that, through appropriate positive goal setting. We talk about good stress and bad stress. Bad stress is the kind of activities, behaviors, and thoughts. Behaviors, thoughts, and emotions. Behaviors, thoughts, and emotions that are not driven by your purpose, that don't have clear timelines, that don't have clear successes, and they just accumulate. And that stressor creates this sympathetic body response, which is constant anxiety, constant inflammation. So
And
you have to reverse
immunosuppression.
so your limbic, hypothalamic, pituitary axis, which is driven by this kind of feeling, suppresses multiple things. Your sex hormones are suppressed. Your growth hormones are suppressed. Your immune system is suppressed through the cortisol and endocrine system. Your thought processes are affected because it affects your focus on survival, and your frontal lobe, which is thinking brain, is actually subdued. So everything is affected through this process. And what is that? When you don't have good stress and you have bad stress. And what is good stress? Good stress is when you have purpose-driven behaviors, thoughts, and emotions that have clear timelines, clear successes. And when you achieve those and you actually mark it with a checkbox or with a reward, intrinsic reward, you actually affect your dopamine reward system. You actually affect your dopamine emotional system. You re-engineer your emotions, you re-engineer your behavior, you re-engineer your outlook on life, not by some contrived act, but by small incremental positive behaviors towards your purpose.
I talk about this in my second book, is that small change produces big results
Yes.
over time.
Yes.
It's like the analogy of just dropping some small change in your piggy bank every day, right?
Yeah.
Over
Yeah.
time, all of a sudden you got a bunch of money in there, right?
Yeah.
And so these small changes that you can make to your daily routine, these small shifts may seem insignificant, and it may seem hard to imagine, like, how is this going to make a difference? But it's that daily consistency. And I love that you said motivation is, not a great word. And I agree, because really what's in the cancer world, especially in healing cancer, you know, what I say is motivation fades, right? It comes and
Yeah.
goes. It's
Yeah.
it's an emotion that some days you feel motivated, some days you don't. And what's going to carry you through to success is determination.
Yeah.
That is the character quality
Yeah.
that, again, may also be hard to measure, but it's a character quality that basically says, I don't care how I feel, I'm doing this because I know I need to do it because it's
Yeah.
good for me, right?
Yeah.
Because I have the end goal in mind, right? I've set a goal. I know where I want to be. Healthy Island, right? I'm pointing my ship toward Healthy Island,
Yeah.
and every day I'm very clear about why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so I think that, it's easier in some ways for a cancer patient to take care of themselves if they've decided they want to change their life. It's harder for someone who is like, well, I'm healthy, my brain works fine, right? To make those changes, right? Because they don't have an imminent threat. It just seems like, oh, that's so far off. Who knows if I'll get it? I probably, I don't have any family history of Alzheimer's. That kind of talk. But it's encouraging that, to know that the same, the same strategy that I've been talking about for years, that you're talking about, you're helping your patients with, can help reduce your risk, put you in the lowest possible risk of
Yes,
most chronic diseases, right?
it does. It does.
And they're simple things.
Very simple thing. Talking about putting change in a piggy bank. In this case, the change actually is exponential. You actually accumulate what is it? You add up to that change that you put in. So the change that you put in today adds to the change that you had it before. So it's exponential.
Compounding.
It's exponentially compounding. That's the power that your brain has. You have 87 billion neurons. When they compare the brain to a muscle, oh my goodness, you'll see how they're really doing disservice to the brain. The biggest human being is 3 times bigger than they could be, right? So you have 87 billion neurons. When you give it the right environment, which is the nutrition, exercise, sleep, and mental activity, which is positive, each neuron can make a couple of connections or as many as 30,000 connections. That's not triple the size. That's 15,000 times the power.
Wow.
That's not compounding. That's compounding on superpower. I don't want to say steroids, on exponential power. So that's what we're doing on a daily basis. When one good meal has that much effect. Creating a pattern of good sleep has that much effect. Focusing on good stress, which is optimizing brain activities. Yes, Sudoku and crossword puzzles are great, but learning a new musical instrument, learning new songs, learning new dances, running a company, volunteering, playing cards with friends like poker, with all the talk back and forth, all of that, enjoy all of this. This is brain activity that's challenging, is around your purpose, has successes. Taking classes that you could never take before and take them now. Those kind of activities really, really compound the benefits of nutrition.
This is really good. Yeah, I'm so glad you got into this, because I was about to ask you my last 2 questions, because I know we're running out of time and I want to be respectful. My last 2 questions are along those lines. Are there any brain training tools? I know there's a lot of stuff out there like, train your brain, improve your brain, games and things like that. Are there any of those that you feel like are really terrific, that are worth recommending? But before you get into it, I think it's awesome that you said, learning new skills. I think that really is so important, like learning how to play a new instrument, learning how to dance, learning karate, like constantly challenging yourself. And not only is it fun in lots of other ways, and you feel good when you learn a new skill, but you're also improving your brain function, which I think that is not talked about enough, that it really is strengthening all these connections and creating new connections in your brain.
Absolutely. So we did a study, a meta-analysis. You know how hard it's a painful process. You have to collect data from others, so they have to respect you and give you all their data. You do a huge analysis, and it was published in PubMed in 2018. They can find it, looking at cognitive activities and MCI, pre-dementia stage, which is a good point to study because you can see signal better, right? You can see change better. They're right at the precipice, but you can either pull back or forward. So what we found was complex behaviors are better. Complex behaviors like what we're talking about, which is playing a musical instrument, learning to dance around your proclivities, but it has to be challenging and it has to be pushing you. So you only know where your edge is, because if it's too much push, it actually causes frustration and failure. So you have to be right at the edge of push and keep pushing yourself at that edge. And that grows the brain. The London taxi driver studies showed that people who were studying for the right to drive taxis in London before GPS, they did imaging studies and neurocognitive before the studying period and afterwards. And these are not young people. They're people in their 40s, 50s, and beyond. These people actually grew their brain doing that. It was their purpose. They wanted to do this for their families. They wanted to get a job and all of that. And it was challenging learning to drive taxis in London. If you've ever been to London, you know it's not Chicago.
Yeah.
It's not Rush Street, Clark Street. It's very all over the place. It's an incredibly challenging task. And when they compared them to bus drivers, their brain actually grew. And we also showed in multiple studies that, those kind of activities help. Even games help. But better than games are real life activities. Real life activities really help. Now, in the future, with what we're hearing about the meta world and AI, will they find your own personalized weaknesses and strengths to build around your proclivities and likes? Absolutely. I'm not one of those people that denies science or denies future, moving into the future. I love that. But we're not there yet. But we have real life activities that are amazing. And also they serve your life purpose. Pick something you always wanted to. I mean, I play guitar. My wife is an amazing singer. I mean, professional singer if she wanted to. And I envy them, her and we've raised our kids on music as well. I envy them, their ears, that just knowing, you play a chord and they know, oh, it's C sharp. I wouldn't even know if it's what instrument it is. I'm such tone, but I play guitar. I'm terrible, but I love it. The cacophony I create, I love. But that challenge of learning, these few chords and then playing a song. First of all, it's better than any course I've taken, any class I've taken. When you learn a song well, and then it challenges your brain at all levels. When you're learning a musical instrument, your frontal lobe is being challenged because you're thinking, your occipital lobe because you're seeing, your memory centers because you're memorizing, your creative centers, your right parietal because you're being creative, your motor centers because you're limbically, you're involving your extremities, and your emotional centers because nothing pulls you emotionally more than music and dance and that kind of stuff. So that's what grows the brain, and boy, does it grow the brain.
That's incredible.
It repeatedly has shown that.
I've been a musician all my life, and have kind of gotten out of it because of things change. And I used to play guitar and sing and tour around in bands and stuff.
Oh my goodness! I envy you more than you can imagine.
I know. I need to pick up. I've got stacks of guitars and cases that I feel like I've forgotten how to play them. It's been a while, but okay. Last question is: I'd love to get your opinion on nootropics. Right. This is a sort of a field of supplements. There's a lot of guys out there promoting these supplements for brain health and for brain performance and all this kind of stuff. Do you see any value in that? Are there any supplementations that you feel like, this is really great for your brain, or herbs or anything like that?
Herbs, yes. Herbs and spices, they're pound for pound, they're the most anti-inflammatory foods, but they're free. So don't buy anything from anybody. We did a study that was just submitted, omega-3 in the developing brain and omega-3 in the aging brain. And it appears that in the plant-based world, there seems to be this thing that if you do anything slightly unnatural, it's bad. We got to be careful about that. Omega-3 is very important, especially if you have kids. Now, if you're confident that you're getting enough omega-3s, which are then converting from plant ALA to EPA and DHA in your kid, I'm fine with that. You're good. But if you're not, it doesn't hurt to take omega-3 supplement, algae-based omega-3 supplement. I'm not against it. I don't push a brand, whatever brand you want. So that's that. Aging brain, we did another study, again, a comprehensive review that showed the same thing. It's important. Now, if you think that you can get it from food, from walnuts and chia and flaxseed, which have high amounts of ALA, I'm okay with that. But if you're worried, I think it's not bad to supplement. And the fears that are being raised that they do cancer because these studies show cancer, we don't have that data. So you can't extrapolate from one set of data, complete different, to another set of data because it fits certain paradigms or certain agendas. Scientists don't have agendas. We go with the data. And if we turn out to be, well, yeah, some do, but we want to make sure that we don't make this into that. So omega-3, yes. Others, only if you're deficient. If you're not B12 deficient, so that's an easy enough check. You can check that. If you're not B12 deficient, there's no need to take B12. If you're not vitamin D, but those are common deficiencies though, vitamin D and B12.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So get it checked because they are profoundly important for your brain, for your whole body, but especially your brain. Please don't underestimate that. For your children, for yourself, for your aging brains, check your B12, vitamin D, thyroid levels, all of that. If you're deficient, first find out why you're deficient. There shouldn't be a reason. But if you can't, then get a supplement, B12, vitamin D, and all that. So those are the exceptions. Beyond that, there's no data. Zero. Well, there's data. There's no valid data that anything else is of benefit. We just did a paper with this is amazing data that we did at Cedars-Sinai, which we gave curcumin or cumin, and looked at the retina with the special devices and looked at it, how it bound to amyloid. So by definition, if it binds to amyloid, then the body removes it. You would think that it reduces amyloid. I mean, anybody else would have gone viral with that, would have created a whole industry around that, right? We can't. That's too much of extrapolation. Yes, it binds amyloid, and yes, there's some evidence that some of it is removed, but we don't have that full evidence yet. So even there, if you're going to add curcumin, add it in your diet, turmeric, curcumin in your diet. But supplementation, nootropic, I think all of that is an incredible marketing ploy at this point. In the future, maybe. Now we don't have anything.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that echoes my sentiment about it as well. There's definitely a lot of marketers pushing these brain supplements and for high performance. And I've laughed about it for years, because sort of my internal joke is like, what is wrong with your brain that you need these? Like, my brain works great. You know? Like, I don't feel the need to like increase my brain power. I'm very happy with the way my brain works right now. But anyway,
if we just do the basic things, which is good nutrition, exercise, you will have done more than the average human being, but in exponential levels for your brain, as far as focus, attention, memory, and everything else. And then for the rest, check your levels once in a while. That's all.
Is it possible to check omega-3 levels?
No.
Yeah, that's not really something.
Well, it is possible, but and we're kind of questioning the validity of it. But nonetheless, it's a call for in yourself, for your own call, if you want to get supplementation or not. To be honest, we do. We thought that the harm side is not there. The harm side, the data is not very strong. The benefit side, this data is pretty strong as far as having appropriate amount of omega-3, which is the main fat the brain needs. And with our kids, we just didn't want to take that risk.
Yeah, huge risk of benefit, minimal to no risk of harm.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Dean Sherzai, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. So educational, so informative. And I want to make sure that folks know that you have a book, The 30-Day Alzheimer's Solution, Prevent and Reverse the Symptoms of Alzheimer's Disease, Dementia, and Cognitive Decline. I know it's on Amazon. I'm sure it's at most major bookstores as well, right?
Yes, that is.
Now, do you have any other resources for folks? Do you have an online program? Do you have anywhere else we should direct people to?
Yeah, if they go to Sherzai MD on social media and everywhere, they can actually connect with us. We have the program online, which you can get from the Neuroplan or the Neuro Academy. If you go to neuroacademy.com, you'll get the things there. And most of what we do, whatever funding we raise, we actually put back into communities where we want to actually spread this concept to communities that don't have any access to healthcare or nutrition information.
And if someone has early stage Alzheimer's, this is still important for them, right? Or early stage dementia, or
absolutely. We're not, if they are already in stage 4 or 5 of Alzheimer's, the likelihood of reversal is not there, but at least it can slow it down and significantly affect the symptoms. So yeah.
Right. So if they already don't know who their relatives are, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
But before that, it's not.
It is. Yeah. I mean, that line is difficult to say, but that makes sense.
I understand. This has been fantastic. Again, Dr. Dean Sherzai, you're awesome. Thank you for the incredible work you've done. I just want to, give you my heartfelt thanks and appreciation, because I know it takes a lot to step outside the box, right? To stay open, and which clearly you have, because if you had become closed-minded and cynical like so many doctors and scientists, you would have never explored nutrition and diet and lifestyle interventions for brain health and body health. And so as a patient and a survivor, it means a lot to me that you are one of the, I'd say, courageous doctors that was not concerned about their reputation, that was really just concerned about results. And that means a lot.
Thank you so much. And the work you do as far as spreading the message of lifestyle it's amazing. We're partners in this fight to kind of bring both science and validated science and change in lifestyle, which is so important. Thank you.
Simple things that everyone can do to help themselves. That's what I'm all about. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for watching. Please share this video with people you know. There's a lot of people out there in the world with Alzheimer's and dementia, or that are on track to develop those types of chronic diseases. And so the more people we can reach with, the better. So please like and share this video and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.